As with most of our conversations about the Israel-Hamas war, the following will include descriptions of terrorism, violence, and bloodshed. Viewer discretion is advised. On Monday of this week, the Israeli Defense Forces held a screening for 200 plus foreign journalists. And in that screening, Israeli officials disclosed to journalists the raw, unedited footage from Hamas's brutal terrorist attack on October 7th. Joining me now from Israel to discuss the screening that was held for journalists, the prospect of a ceasefire, and the status of Israel's war against Hamas is Tal Heinrich, spokesperson for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Ms. Heinrich, thank you very much for joining us on Forum Daily.
Thank you, David.
As much as it may be difficult or awful to describe, what was in the unedited footage that was aired for journalists?
So as you know, on October 7th, Hamas terrorists committed a massacre against the people of Israel. They butchered 1,400 Israelis and they injured over 5,300 Israelis. And as we are speaking right now, they continue to fire rockets at us. Over 8,100 rockets, in fact, have been fired since the outbreak of this war that we didn't start and we didn't even expect. We were dragged into this war by Hamas. Unfortunately, some journalists or people in the international community were casting doubt about the scope and the brutality of Hamas's atrocities because we get it. It is very difficult for especially Western modern minds to digest such atrocities, the likes of which have happened here. These are worse than ISIS. For that reason, we have decided to arrange for this screening. And in fact, also at the United Nations, the Israeli ambassador just today held another screening of this kind because we wanted the world to see. We could not release some of these footage out of dignity to some of the families, but part of these pictures were released and you can see how they burned families. They burned people together as they were shielding their children. They chopped off body parts. They tied children in front of their parents in the different, the other side of the room. And they tortured the children in front of their parents and the parents in front of the children and they shot them at the end. And also, you're probably very much familiar with the scene of that big party that was being held, a festival in the south, where over 260 Israelis were murdered by Hamas terrorists. So you see how they burnt bodies. You see how they fired at a pit. So there are different kind of pictures and different kind of testimonies by the people who dealt with the bodies on the Israeli part. But also what we showed journalists was the videos that Hamas themselves live streamed. The terrorists, they boasted about their achievements. So there is a phone call, for example, of a Hamas terrorist taking pride in the murder of 10 Jews. So he's calling his parents inside the Gaza Strip. He talks to his father and his mother, and he says, well, I did it. I killed 10 Jews. And that was celebrated. So some of these images are very hard to describe. There's a woman that was burnt and you can see, you can't see anything but the teeth, like the face is entirely burnt, like it's unbelievable what you can see there. Toddlers with blood around them. So these are some of the atrocities that were committed here. This is the only reason why Israel is acting in Gaza right now to dismantle Hamas. We have decided that we can no longer live next to this monster.
And what has been the response from the journalistic world in regards to these screenings? Has it eliminated that doubt or eliminated that level of questioning?
In the civilized world, I would say yes, but only in the civilized world, because but we do unfortunately still see some Holocaust denial levels of denials right now, which is really unbelievable, by the same people who somehow take everything coming out of Gaza at face value, as if they would have taken numbers and reports coming out of North Korea at face value. The Gaza Strip is a terror base controlled by Hamas. But I think that some people did realize that what happened here is so brutal and so different than what the region has faced before. And therefore, many understand in the international community that Israel has the moral duty to act and defend itself, and that our military objective is clear and just, and that we need to bring the Hamas regime down. It can simply be no longer. So, but
We'll
in terms of
discuss-
the direct, I'll just tell you that in terms of the direct response of the journalists, well, many of them cried, many of them vomited. That was terrible to watch. It's 45 minutes of raw footage.
Ms. Heinrich, obviously the horror of what happened on October 7th plays a significant role in Israel's response to Hamas. Many in the international community have called for a ceasefire, some, including some of those being members of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's Liberal Party. Your office and the Prime Minister have emphatically responded, saying that there will be no ceasefire. Why is that the case?
It's not negotiable, you see, because a ceasefire would mean that Hamas can get away with what they did. The terrorists can get away with what they did, and they will do it again and again and again. Israelis will be butchered, and you and I will have this conversation again after another massacre in what, a few months, a few more years. And not only that massacre, but also the reality that Israelis have gotten used to living under rocket fire constantly. We're talking about thousands of rockets, not only over the last 20 days, 21 days, but that's been the situation in years.
What about the concept of a humanitarian pause, in military activity to allow for aid to flow to civilians?
Well, aid is flowing to civilians because we said that we will not prevent the transfer of supplies, medical supplies, food, and water coming into Gaza from the Rafah border crossing between Egypt and Gaza. And that has been going on. So there is supplies, there are supplies transfers that are coming into the Strip.
And in regards to aid, what processes are in place right now to ensure that they're going to civilians and not being siphoned off by Hamas? Because obviously that would be a growing concern in terms of not wanting to continue to provide assistance in any way to an organization you're at war with.
Sure. Hamas are the people with the guns. They're the ones controlling everything in the Gaza Strip, and they're the ones responsible for anything happening there. So once the shipments do enter Gaza, we cannot stop them from, stealing these shipments and taking them, diverting them into their war machine. But trust me, we are monitoring the movements of these shipments. And if they step out of line, we will act accordingly.
And there's been a lot of debate about access to water, which is, of course, a human right. How much water does Israel supply Gaza on a normal basis?
So right now we're not supplying anything from Israel's territory. We're not supplying it. Nothing is coming in from Israel's territory because, as you know, there are still holding 229 hostages, Israeli hostages. And we said that that will be contingent upon the release of the hostages. But we are not preventing the transfer of water and supplies and food from Egypt into Gaza. So that kind of supply is coming in from there. But there are pumped water in Gaza. Again, Hamas is controlling everything. The IDF spokesperson, in fact, just said it.
Yeah, and I mean, many have argued that fuel is the key here, right? To be able to run water sanitation plants, to keep hospitals running. What's the justification for refusing to allow fuel into Gaza?
Well, first, there's plenty of fuel in Gaza. Here, I'll show you. I have actually two satellite images here. If you can see, these are stockpiles of fuel in the Gaza Strip. In fact, I think it's 500,000 liters, gallons, liters. But Hamas is controlling these stockpiles. And what they are doing is that they are using these stockpiles to be repurposed for their war machine, being used for missiles. And hospitals have also, they're not lacking of fuel. The IDF spokesperson just said it to international journalists, by the way. And he just gave one example of the Shifa Hospital in Gaza City, which is the largest in the Gaza Strip. And he showed exactly where under this hospital embedded are the Hamas command centers. That is the reality that Israel is dealing with. Hospitals are Hamas command centers. This is where
we know it's been widely talked about the use of human shields as a war crime, the use of civilians as shields is a war crime. Now, the international NGO Human Rights Watch has accused the Israeli military of using white phosphorus on October 11th and 12th. White phosphorus, if it's used in a dense civilian area, could certainly be classified as a war crime. Did Israel use white phosphorus in the early stages of the war?
No, we didn't. Israel is not committing war crimes. Israel did not use that material, and Israel is acting by international law. We have one clear military objective, and that is to dismantle Hamas. And that is what we're focused on, and we are doing it with legal means.
Ms. Heinrich, I really appreciate you sitting down with us on Forum Daily. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.